And I took a look at all these things, these toys, as I was standing in my house in the suburbs, and I was like, this is what society told me would make me happy, so that's what I did. And granted, when I was driving the car, when I was riding the motorcycle, yeah, that was fun. There's no doubt about that. There was, I guess, an element of happiness to all that stuff, but quite frankly, it just wasn't very fulfilling. So at that point, and I was probably halfway into my career at that point, so 8 or 9 years in or something. At that point, I told myself, there's no way I can go the rest of my life doing this, just working for money, buying the stuff, the toys that were supposed to make me happy, but it really wasn't doing that. So that was really like the fork in the road. Like I either keep going down the way I am now, following the same path of working and spending, or I could start making some changes. And at that point, I didn't necessarily know exactly how I was going to do this, how I was going to achieve financial independence. Quite frankly, I didn't even know about the concept. But like a lot of people out there in the personal finance, early retirement community, I found somebody who I really related to. And for me, that was Mr. Muddy Mustache. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of him and his blog. He has a very unique way of writing, and he was a software developer just like I was. He led a very similar life to me. So I really started reading his material and how he was putting those pieces into place, how he was playing his cards, and it really started to take a lot of wisdom from his experience into my life. Starting from cutting back on a lot of my spending, really trying to understand what truly made me happy and what was just spending just to spend because that's what you do. So there are a lot of pieces that I put into place. And really, when I married my wife a couple of years after that, that's when things really started to ramp up because she wasn't a spender. I was the spender. She was more of a saver. So now we have two salaries coming in because she worked a full-time job as a rocket scientist, an actual rocket scientist, and I was in IT. So those combined salaries, I mean, we could do something really powerful with that with all that money. I think combined by the end of our careers, we were pulling in a little over 200 grand. And this was back in 2011 or 12. So about 10 years ago. That's pretty darn good money. So we could have like gone on expensive vacations, bought really anything we wanted and lived the high life, or we can save the majority of our money, cut back a lot, and then quit our jobs, quit corporate America, and do what we really want to do, control our time and really control our lives to the maximum extent. There's a lot of details that went into that. I'm sure I'll talk a little bit about that later, but I don't want to overwhelm this conversation right now. But that's kind of how all this started, and that got us onto this path of financial independence and quitting our jobs early and really controlling our money and our time in a really powerful way.
Perfect introduction. Well put. I definitely have pieces that I'm going to dig into. For sure, one, I know that you put out your newsletter regularly. That's something that I've been reading. Want to dig into the mindset that goes behind that, as well as the more specific type of investing, and then kind of how you made that mental switch. I'm going to get the other speakers involved, but we'll definitely come back around for that. And meanwhile, everyone in the audience, if you haven't already checked them out, the three speakers that we have up here are incredible. They put out awesome content. They have content both on Twitter and outside Twitter. I think many of them have free and paid, and you really can't go wrong by following any of them. I'm following all three of them, and I recommend you do the same. So big shout out to Steve. Thank you for being on here. And we're going to drop it over to the Wealth Dad for the same type of introduction, a little bit of background on yourself, where this financial journey started and, what you're up to now.
Yeah, appreciate it. Can you guys hear me all right one last time? Making sure you can
Yes.
hear me. Awesome. Well, first I want to say how cool it is kind of speaking with Steve. I'll talk a little bit about my journey and how kind of I connect to Steve a little bit. So I'll save that for as I go along with this conversation. But I'll just kind of go where I started because I don't necessarily have, a starting point in life that I can point to like this clicked for me. I just had a bunch of small events that happened in my life. And I've always been a kind of forward-thinking guy. I've never been a big spender. So I'll just kind of talk about how my experiences built on each other and pretty much got me to where I am today. So we'll start with, I went to college. All of my older sisters went to college, so that was the natural route that I, was destined to go. I'm the youngest in my family, and my youngest oldest sister is 9 years older than me, and then my oldest is 13 years older than me. So you can probably call me the oops of the family. But I was blessed that they all had their head on a swivel and, were doing well in life, and that I had examples to look to when I was a kid. So I always knew, do well academically, go to college, and you'll be put in a good position. And that's pretty much what society, as Steve says, tells you kind of where you should be going in your teenage years up into your early 20s. But when I got to college, I had no idea what I really wanted to do. I think I signed up for criminal justice, no real reason. I just kind of fell into it and did that all throughout college. No real plan. I actually got the exact same GPA in college that I did in high school, 3.26. I think that was just me just kind of doing everything that I needed to do to pass and not doing anything more. What kind of jumped me, or at least got me a great start in my career, was I got an intern. I live in the DMV area that's right outside of Washington, D.C. And if you live or know anything about this area, it's a massive federal government obviously lives here. A lot of Army bases. So a lot of the jobs around here, a lot of the high paying jobs, you have to get a government security clearance. So I was fortunate to do an internship program my junior year, and I got an internship with Customs and Border Protection. That actually got me a secret clearance before I graduated college. So that got me a really good, essentially, resume builder going into the real world. But I still didn't necessarily, once again, I had the degree path of criminal justice. I had the security clearance, but it isn't necessarily anything I loved. It was just something, to do. Because once again, I had examples of, go to college, get a job, and do fine. So once I graduated, I was fortunate to actually get a call while I was living at my parents' house from an entry-level position that paid me almost next to nothing. I would think my entry salary was $35,000. And this was back in summer of 2014. So what's that, about 8 years ago? And I think all of my friends at the time were making probably about 50, 55 coming out. So I was behind the pay scale initially in my first couple of years. But what kind of changed me towards finance was I had a boss in that first job that kind of noticed that I was doing a good job, but I didn't really have a direction. So he sat me down in his office and he said, first and foremost, focus on your retirement first. And, me as a 22-year-old, I'm not really thinking about that. And it didn't really, cross my eye at the time. I'm in an office working with a bunch of former military officers, current government workers. So they kind of all they're all retired guys and working a second job. But it just wasn't something I thought about. So I kind of let it stir for 2 or 3 months. And then I signed up for my company's 401k. I was a contractor at the time. And my very first investment was a $57 contribution into my 401k. Once again, I didn't think anything of it still. I'm still a pretty naive young kid. But then I remember logging into the account one day and seeing pretty much like a big green up symbol, and it was like a couple dollars, literally probably like $3.57. But what captured my eye is that my money was growing. I connected the dots immediately, that the money that I had invested in that account for my paycheck was growing. And I think that was the very first moment that made me kind of attached towards learning about investing, because a couple months later, I asked my wife at the time, well, I didn't ask her, but I just pretty much told her, I said, hey, I want to start reading about investing. I've been going on to Amazon, seeing all these books, and I really want to, see what this is all about. This is something that I think that, can do us very well. Neither of us came from money, especially my wife definitely didn't come from money, but I pretty much came from a blue collar family. My mom does daycare still to this day. My dad did post office and now pretty much works, does cigar and wine stuff. So we didn't come from money at all. So I thought this was a great opportunity for us to potentially, jump into that next social class. We weren't making great money, but like I said, we saw our money growing and we wanted to explore that route. So I read pretty much every personal finance book you could find on Amazon. So any of you listening, if you've heard pretty much The Millionaire Next Door, Simple Path to Wealth, The Little Book of Common Sense Investing, you name it, all the personal finance books that have been spewed on Twitter, I've read all of them. And and they pretty much got me to the same thinking that the majority of us, get to when we first start our journey. Invest, 10 to 20% of your income, put it in low cost index funds. It's going to be hard to beat the market if you try to, pick individual stocks to beat it. So that formed pretty much my consensus on how I was going to build wealth. I was going to put money in retirement accounts. I was going to invest it in index funds, and I was going to, limit my expenses and increase my income as we went. But then I kind of before I started the Wealth Dad account, I kind of hit a crossroads. And this is where, my connection to Steve comes in a little bit. As I was learning about finance, reading all the books, getting my finances in order, I started helping some of my family members, my sister, a couple close friends on investing. I was just pretty much teaching them basic things I learned, IRAs, index funds, how to open their accounts. And then I wanted to do, a blog. I wanted to see if I could actually, spread my word, do my part to pass the knowledge down. And I opened a blog a couple years ago under a different pseudonym called Frugal Money Man. And Steve's account or Steve's blog was one of the very first kind of big blogs I followed. I believe it was called Think, Save, Retire. Steve, you can correct me when you're talking again. But you were kind of in my shoes, just almost a decade ahead of me. So I'm also now kind of in the tech field, and I was transitioning at the time to kind of the tech field. And his story resonated with me so much, and he kind of, shed the light on the next fastest way for me to grow my wealth is essentially increasing my income. So that's when me and my wife started really thinking about, how do we take our careers where I was only making 35,000, she's only making like 30,000 as a secretary assistant. How do we get up our skills to, change jobs, change careers, and get it so, we're making $100,000 combined, $150,000 combined. And like I said, Steve was one of the very first people who kind of changed my mentality towards that. So thank you, Steve, again for that. But I was creating a blog. I did it for a year. I think I had like 1,000 followers on Twitter, maybe that on Instagram. So nothing as big as a following as what the Wealth Dad kind of account has now. But I got to a burnout stage about a year in. I wasn't really making any money, which my intention of it was to eventually monetize it. And, I just was getting burned out. So this is at the point now where I'm kind of transitioning careers. And then that old boss who told me about retirement actually encouraged me to, potentially look at becoming an officer in the military. So I was actually very into that process of going into the military. I was actually accepted into the Naval Officer Candidate School. I was all ready to go. I was going to leave the blog behind and pretty much start this new career that I saw, as a good stepping stone for me and my family. But then the process took so long to actually, get, from my very first talking to the recruiter to actually getting accepted. And then I kind of hit a crossroads because then I was like, I want to do this personal finance thing again. I want to give it one more shot to see if I can make something of this, monetize it and spread it even more, make it bigger. Or I can go down this kind of safer route in the military, get a pension, get a TSP, which is their 401k, and, leave a pretty good life for my family. But I eventually decided, to bet on myself. So I went into transition from criminology. I went into business intelligence. That's kind of a different conversation for a different time, but it elevated me to the point now where I'm making pretty much six figures. So that got me to transition from making low income to higher income. And then my wife did a similar thing to now where from our 9 to 5s, we're making closer to about $175,000 now. So we focused on that income part of it during that kind of, that growth phase. And then that's when I finally, about a year after, saying no to the Navy, is when I created the Wealth Dad account. That was January 2020. This time I actually had a plan for it this time where, the blog, I was just writing posts every day. This one, I knew I had to kind of create a product because what I knew what was making money for people blogging was either they had a product of their own. I think that's the first time I saw people like with a product for like Facebook ads. They had courses on it. People sold their websites. I think Steve's a great example of that. And they were also doing ads. So the one thing I wanted to do was a product. I thought I had a good kind of knowledge base to do an ebook. So if any of you know who I am, I'll frequently market my two ebooks, Index Fund Investing 101 and Investing for Your Children 101. And those have now produced me over $100,000 in ebook sales in addition to, on top of our 9 to 5 income. So these past couple years have been a very big kind of growth stage for us, for me and my wife, in terms of increasing on the income side of it. We've invested pretty much over 50% of our income. And I did a tweet the other day. I would never consider myself an investing expert. There's some great kind of, stock picking or people who analyze stocks all day on Twitter who could talk to you all day about the charts and the underlying businesses that make up indexes and, why they're investing in certain companies. That's never going to be me, and I'm not going to pretend that is me. What I knew initially is what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. I knew what I wasn't good at was picking stocks, and I knew what I was good at, was increasing my income, limiting my expenses, and flooding everything I had into index funds within my investment accounts. So these past couple of years have been, it's a blessing to me and my wife. We're fortunate that, we took this bet, going down the wealth dad route and betting kind of on our careers in unison. And now we just use both of them off of each other to expedite our financial journey.
Really, really well put. And I appreciate the depth which you went there and also the connections to Steve, which is fantastic. And I know Steve does put out some great content. I also really appreciate you sharing, some of the details and on the monetary side of even, the courses that you've put together, the burnout that you've gone through. I think that does a lot for people who may be in very similar spots. And I really do hope, if anybody is listening and connecting, click in, check the timeline, check the links in their bios. You can continue to see more of this information, but an awesome introduction there. So thank you to Wealth Dad for that. And I'm going to go over to AOP now, the Art of Purpose, who is always seems like all over my timeline with wisdom and knowledge. So I'm glad we were able to get you on a space, and would love to hear the same type of intro style with additional details from yourself.
Hey, thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it. So I guess a lot of people don't really know my backstory. I don't publicize my backstory too much, though I have written some threads on it, and I've been on a bunch of podcasts where I've talked about it. But basically, I kind of got a later start than a lot of other people. I grew up in a household where we really didn't talk a lot about personal finance, stocks, and investing. This wasn't something that I was brought up with. And around the age of 32, I came across the Mr. Money Mustache blog site, scoped it out, and it pretty much changed my life. Like, at that point, I realized that I was going to be able to invest and do certain things a certain way. And my wife and I got really hardcore into investing at this time. So we got up to something like a 60 to 75%, invest savings rate, which is really an investings rate. Lowered our taxes, learned as much about that movement as possible. I think it's like it's a great gateway drug. I have a lot of mixed opinions about the FIRE community now, but from getting into it and learning, it's very powerful because you then start to realize that there is a way out of the rat race, and it's going to happen a lot quicker, and it's going to happen as long as you're willing to dedicate and put yourself into it. So around age 32, this was about 8-9 years ago, started getting really into it, started to invest, opened 457s, by the way, are a life hack. Not enough people talk about 457s. They're offered to government employees, and they just absolutely trump 401ks because you can withdraw the money at any point in the game. They're perfect for the early retiree. And if you have access to these, you can start withdrawing money when you leave your job, which is awesome for people like me. So what I did was I got really into the game. I started doing side hustles as well. Joe Hart's here. I actually started as a flipper. So I was a public school teacher. I worked for 20 years, and then I would flip. On the weekends, I'd be out there buying video games in bulk. I would be doing all this stuff, flipping, and then I would take the money that I would be, earning on the side and from cutting our expenses down, investing in the 457s, and then I would buy, stocks, investments, just totally start building up a cash. It became a video game for me. It was this thing where it was just we're going to get the numbers higher and higher and higher and higher and higher. And my wife and I just continually worked at this, built up our stash, and along the way, this is a really intersection of things. I sat down and started this account right around when I hit around $1 million net worth. And, as a fire person, you work towards that $1 million net worth. You work towards building your investments. And then I actually got there, and it was like one of the biggest letdowns ever. I was, it's like a good start. That's the way that I look at it. It's like a good start. But I hit there. We were so hardcore at it, and we worked so hard at it that we actually got there in about 6.5, 7 years because we stashed. We were just working so hard. And around at that same time, I decided to, and by the way, I want to say I made some extreme lifestyle changes when I say this. Like when I say like you should skip coffee for if you're not a millionaire, like I actually believe this stuff. Like I went out there, I had a Mustang convertible, GT Mustang convertible. I took it, and one of the first things I did is I sold it. I traded it straight for a Nissan Leaf, like straight up. And I actually have some people tell me like that story's inspired them to do the same. I don't think you deserve a fancy car if you're not at least at a 7-figure net worth. I truly believe it. Like you should be doing everything that you have to get yourself in the right position. It's going to pay off such dividends later on in life. You won't believe. Do what you need to do to get there. So I sold my Mustang convertible. All I did was hustle. People would be like, "What are you doing? Like you driving this Nissan Leaf?" And then like they're still working. But around when I hit around the 7-figure net worth, I decided to start this account. And this account has been truly a blessing. It's been an incredible experience. I started this account for $0, and basically I make 4 times what I did as a public school teacher. Um, so I'm very blessed to be in this position. And I think a lot of it, my success on this platform and selling courses, we sell a course called Create 24/7, which has sold like 1,700 copies plus on Gumroad. And we have a community as well. We run a community. And we just do a lot of other things, a lot of consulting, coaching. All of this has allowed, one of the reasons I've been successful, though, in my opinion, is because I already had a stash there. So I kind of have this counterintuitive idea. Not a lot of people see this, but I actually think being defensive early on is extremely powerful. And, you hear a lot of advice out on money Twitter saying, when you're in your 20s, do all of these things. Yeah, if you have a lot of great guidance, I could definitely see that being a possibility. But being extremely defensive and building up a huge stash first and then going to build your business, I think it takes a lot of pressure off of you when you decide to do something like this. So I think that's been one of my reasons why I've been able to do well is because at the end of the day, if things don't work out, I can be like, okay, well, at least I have all of these investments. You know what I mean? So it takes a lot of pressure off of you when you're having to make decisions. You can do what is right more than being forced to go down certain pathways.
Love it. Love it. Really well put. And, I completely agree with you there with some of those lifestyle changes that need to be implemented. Especially I feel like during COVID, some people have been able to let those things into their lives. People, moved in together, moved back into situations where they weren't paying for so much rent, didn't feel like they needed to be in the peak of the city, near work, right? Perhaps got rid of those fancy cars and something else. I didn't drink coffee all last year, so I relate to you on that. It's definitely been a monetary saver, having have coffee in a couple of years. And so along those lines, really enjoy what you're saying. And I do want to throw some follow-up questions at everyone. I feel like that was perfect. We did first 30 minutes on some introduction, so we can throw some follow-up questions here. So, Steve, I want to come over to you first, and feel free to, if you wanted to throw any comments in response to anything the other guys said, to do that. But one of the things, so Steve, I started following you about a year ago, and I know that because on April 1st last year, I got one of my first emails from you, and your email said, "Money is a tool." So I'm curious, when we're talking here about money mentality, if you could explain to you kind of what the purpose of money is and what it can be used as a tool for, and how people can best match up the money that they're making and using with the right mindset.
Yeah, money in and of itself is relatively, I mean, it's relatively meaningless. I don't work just to accumulate money. That's just very impersonal, and you don't get emotionally wrapped up in something, bigger and better than you. And when you do that, that's really when things really start to fall into place. You have a purpose, you have motivation for going to work every day, or if you're an entrepreneur working from home or whatever, sitting in front of your computer for 8 to 10 hours a day, if you have a reason to do that, that's not just money. It's not just to get your paycheck. I think you're going to understand how everything fits together and the value of financial independence a lot better. And when I first started my career, I certainly was not this way whatsoever. I just wanted to make money. I just wanted to get the paycheck. I wanted to make as much as I can so I can buy all of these things. But man, once I realized, and this takes some time for a lot of people, it certainly took some time for me, but once you realize that the money you're earning is essentially earmarked for something important, some kind of goal in your future, that's going to be incredibly motivational for you. So in my case, it happened to be, I want to get the heck out of corporate America. I don't want to work for the rest of my life. I can't do this. So for me, that end goal was quitting as fast as I possibly can. So every single day I went to work, every dime I made, I knew exactly what that was going to. So for a lot of people, that might not be your goal. It might be something else. It might be retirement at 60 or 65, or it might be funding your child's education, or it might be hell, might be buying a yacht. Whatever it is, but money is a tool to be used to build something, and only you are going to understand what that something is. So if you're listening to the spaces right now and you don't know what that tool, I mean, what you're building with the tool, what you're building with your income, then take some time. And I mean, you don't have to figure this out tonight. There's no reason to put that kind of pressure on you. But over the next couple days or even the next couple weeks, really start to think about what the tool is building for you and understand what that is. Think about what you want in the future. And once you have that figured out, once you have that destination, that goal in your mind, it's going to make everything that you're doing now, it's going to make that one, it's going to make it make more sense to you, and you're going to be way more motivated to actually put in the work day in and day out to earn this money because you know exactly where it's going. So keep the impersonal, I'm just here to make money out of it, and really start to understand I am making money so I could accomplish this. I'm making money so I can retire by 40 or by 50, or so I can buy this and that, or I can move overseas and live in Europe, whatever that is. Understand what it is, and you're going to be way more motivated every single day to bring home that paycheck.
Very well put. Thank you, Steve. Okay, the wealth ed question for you. I often find in life that you don't really learn something until you've taught it to someone else. It sounds like over the last couple of years, you've been really leaning into more of the teaching, right? You have your books and other stuff. What's something within the money mentality mindset that you felt like you really grasped once you started teaching it to others?
Yeah, so I can kind of, I guess, go towards, how I formulated the book. I think I've not coming from money, and not ever really having money of my own gave me a unique advantage, I believe, in creating a product specifically on investing. Because I know what the majority, feel like when they go into reading these books. I know what they're confused on. I know what their pain points are, and I know what generally confuses them. So I think that was actually a big advantage for me coming into this, as opposed to maybe if I studied finance, I would have been, maybe leaps and bounds ahead, and maybe I wouldn't understand those pain points that the majority of people had. So one thing and I still pride my books in to this day. I don't know if any of the readers on this call have read any of my books. But my plan for teaching was, I believe most people are very visual based as opposed to, just kind of reading paragraphs on end. So one of my main goals with my book was to make it completely different than, all the other ebooks that I was seeing being created at the time. So I bought a couple people's books, and they were, not that they weren't good per se, but the majority of it was pretty much just a written PDF with a bunch of paragraphs. And that doesn't really stand out to someone, who doesn't understand money, because they're going to get bored really quick, or they're just going to lose their train of thought. So I knew most people like me coming into it needed to see visuals that put the puzzle pieces together for them. So both of my books, I made visualizations essentially almost 50% of my books. Both of them are 100 pages technically, but probably 50 of the pages are just visuals that break down the material even more. And I think that's where all the, the good reviews and testimonials come from the book. I've gotten, half the people who have DM'd me about my books have said, will you do a course just on creating visuals and creating like a visually pleasing ebook? So, I mean, there's a market there if I ever wanted to attack it. But having that experience, as someone who didn't come from money, gave me an actual market advantage because I knew the customer base. So I think I definitely connected there. Now that the book is sold for 2 years, it doesn't surprise me that it's continuing to sell now. The fortunate thing is if you create a product that, progresses a person forward in a way, kind of like my niche is with investing, there's always going to be new customers coming in. There's always new 17-year-olds turning 18. There's always new people graduating college who want to learn this information. So, once I kind of figured out the product, built the product how I wanted to, it's definitely exceeded my expectations, but now I'm not surprised by it. And I'm happy I put all of that time in creating those ebooks, because now, it took me a month to probably build and write those ebooks. And now I'm still cashing in thousands of dollars a month based off of just that initial work I put in, 2 years ago for Index Fund Investing 101 and a year ago with Investing for Your Children 101, where now they're just routinely kind of selling, like I said, thousands a month on end because the product is good. I know it's good and the customers tell me that it's good. So that's kind of, where I think my unique perspective came from not coming from money and kind of helping me create a pretty good product to sell online.
Yeah, that passive income is so important and can definitely relate to you there. Just a minute on my end, and I'll throw it over to AOP for another question. And with you're talking about not coming from money, so growing up, I did have it pretty good, but then 2008 hit, and my family actually declared bankruptcy, and it definitely got a little bit intense. But I think it really taught me a lot, because after that, it was basically understood. I have six brothers, so there was obviously kind of a notion. It was once you hit 18, you're going financially independent, and that was pretty interesting. But by the time I got there, I think it really readied me for a lot going through college, where I found my own cosigner on my student loans. I didn't take a dollar from my parents to go to college, right? Paid for my own rent, was really a lot more independent and searching for food and other things like that. And it totally, changed my trajectory. So absolutely agree with you. It does make you a lot more scrappy, and I think a lot more understanding of what you need to do in order to be successful. And that's what got me into finance. Was I actually saw what happened to in 2008 and some poor financial decisions that were made close to me, and I was really like, I don't want this to happen to me again, and I don't want it to happen to others. And that's why I've been really inspired to do things like these spaces where we're able to chat about spaces like this, but also investment spaces and so many others, where it is kind of that game changing circumstance for others, because I think people just don't know, right? They don't know how a credit system works. They don't know how to build passive income and other things. And if somebody just holds your hand a little bit, it goes a super long way. So absolutely relate to you on that. Okay, AOP, I got another question for you. We were talking about lifestyle changes beforehand. Besides for giving up coffee, can you give me two or three lifestyle changes that you were able to make that you saw really big benefits and impacts from?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me give you what you need to do if you want to get real serious about it. Okay. First thing you need to do is you need to start tracking your net worth, right? If you were going to lose weight or get in shape, you need to weigh yourself every single day. That's a fact, right? So the first thing you should do is start tracking your net worth above all. You can use Mint, you can use personal, I think it's Personal Capital, or you can even use a spreadsheet. I know Financial Squirrel's got one out there that he has, but regardless of what you use, you need to start tracking what you do. It's all about developing awareness, right? I could hit you with like three little small hacks, but if you implement these big things, you're going to see some real changes. So from there, you're going to need to like comb through every single purchase that you make. Literally, like grab your credit card statements, grab everything. Take a look at what you're doing. Is it a necessity? Yeah, like I talk a lot of trash about Netflix because I hate Netflix. I think it's a waste of your time. Not only do you waste time, you could spend $15 a month on it, right? This is something like $170 a year. But how much time are you wasting? Your time is valuable. right? If you were very serious about becoming wealthy, you wouldn't be using your time to watch some stupid show on Netflix. You'd be out there hustling. So what you need to do is you need to start tracking every single one of your expenses. Cut out anything that is not necessary. Start with the biggest ones first. Cut the biggest fat first. The biggest fat for me was my car. Like I literally calculated how much it would cost me to commute. Now I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Typical person here commutes like 40 minutes. They take tolls. They're probably spending $3,000-4,000 a year commuting. Maybe you can make a lifestyle change and live closer to your work, right? Right, you could set up camp, try to get closer to your work, or what I did was I bought a Leaf and I cut down that expense by about 90% from going from a gas guzzling Mustang that you have high insurance with, and when you take a look at all of the expenses that you're using, instead just use electricity's cheap in Texas. There were some really great rebates. It cut the expenses down greatly. All of a sudden, you start looking at these big things, cut them out. Maybe like don't dine out so often. Maybe you're going out 2-3 times a week. Start cooking. It's going to make you healthier too, because you're going to start cooking healthier stuff. And then on top of that, my third tip is to start some kind of side hustle and invest all of that money. And what you're going to do is you're going to use that side hustle as I think of it like a runway, right? You're going to one day, your goal is to one day escape from the 9-to-5 grind. Okay. And think of your side hustle as a runway. You're building like this whole big thing. So if you're into flipping, like even if, what you're doing there is work at it, like learn as much of it as you can. Maybe you can teach somebody, like you just mentioned in the gym. Maybe you can start teaching people because you'll understand it better, right? Maybe you can write a guide on it. And, what you need to do with all of your side hustle money is you don't touch any of that money. If you're not a millionaire, you don't touch that money. That money goes directly into investing. And if you can make these big changes, start tracking your net worth, cut the biggest expenses out, and start making more money, you are going to get to your goals faster than you can imagine.
Very well put. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on knowing where your money is at all times. I think it's super important. People definitely nowadays, especially as they're getting more and more different types of investment opportunities all over, people lose track of it. And then with that, sometimes you have recurring expenses and other things that will factor in heavily. Absolutely. Okay, Steve, another question for yourself. As somebody who, was able to retire early, I feel like a big part of that is having established systems for passive income and other areas. Are there any investments that you have discovered that maybe is an area where you put your money that generates either passive income or is just honestly intriguing investment opportunity that you think more retail or people should know about at a younger age that could potentially help them build wealth faster?
Well, I am a very, very basic person when it comes to investing. I don't pick and choose stocks. Quite frankly, I'm not smart enough to do that. And I just don't want the stress of hoping that, the money I invest in this company, that company's got to do well. Yes, you can make money doing that, but the numbers consistently show that index funds outperform actively managed funds over the long term. There's no question about that. There's also no question that you can make more money by picking and choosing stocks, but you really have to keep up on it, and you have to love to do that. If you don't, you're probably not going to make much money. And that's one thing that I really don't like to do. My wife and I probably spend 5 minutes a month, and I'm not exaggerating whatsoever, on our finances because they are very easy. They're very straightforward. Index funds, forget them. That really is it. But going, if you work a full-time job right now, which I'm sure the majority of you do, there's lots of there's lots of vehicles that you can use to build wealth. I mean, the 401k is a great one. AOP mentioned 457 if you work for the government. That's another great option. Roth IRAs are great, especially if you expect taxes to go up in the future, which let's face it, they're going to. So you pay taxes now in a Roth IRA, but then you get to withdraw that money penalty free and tax free at I think it's 65. So, I mean that's an excellent investment vehicle. Another one that a lot of people tend to dismiss is the HSA, or the health savings account. This is a gold mine if you have access to an HSA. Not all employers and health insurance plans will offer this. But if you are, I mean, if your healthcare plan does offer an HSA, I would highly recommend you look into this. It is tax advantaged, which means you are contributing pre-tax money into your HSA, and that lowers your taxable income, just like your 401k does. And throughout your working career, the idea of an HSA is you can withdraw money penalty free for qualified medical expenses. But once you get to I think it's like 63 or 65. Look that up. I'm not exactly sure of the exact age, but once you hit a certain age, your HSA, any unspent money in your HSA essentially turns into a 401k. So you can withdraw that money for any reason whatsoever, spend it on anything, whether it's health or a new yacht or whatever, it doesn't matter. It turns into a 401k. The caveat to the HSA is they typically require a high deductible plan. So that's not going to be right for everybody. If you go to the doctor a lot, or if you have pre-existing conditions that requires a lot of yearly maintenance and yearly expenses, then an HSA might not be right for you. But the what I'm trying to get across here with the HSA is if you do have access to it, really look into it, because that is an awesome investment vehicle for you to consider. But yeah, other than those mechanisms while you're working and just regular index funds, I might have like 3% of my net worth in crypto. I have a little Bitcoin and I have a little Ethereum just to have fun with that. But quite frankly, I like the track record of index funds. I like the history. I feel way more comfortable with the traditional investment vehicles. So that's what I use, and I've made so much money over the last couple of decades just indexing and forgetting. It could not be more simple.
Awesome, Steve. Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that's definitely a strong strategy, and we've seen over the last couple of years those indexes have really risen, and then they really didn't take as big a hit as some of these growth stocks and others took when they fell off. So, absolutely respect for that strategy and everything going on there. Okay, so we're coming up on about 12 minutes left, and I just want to make sure everybody has time for any closing remarks or anything that they wanted to add, personally to the conversation. I know I've been kind of dictating it with leading questions. So I think we'll go around and just give everybody, a chance to speak anything else they want to add to this type of conversation, speak any advice for retail for their followers. And of course, we can always do, more spaces like this in the future if y'all enjoyed it. I just do have that next one coming up at 7:30. So let's go over to the Wealth Dad first. If you just want to give maybe a few minutes on, big takeaways within this area, just what you would recommend, people do in order to continue building their money mentality, their personal wealth, their opportunities. And, if there's anything else you want to share about where people can find you, your content, that type of stuff, would love to have that as well.
Yeah, sure. So I can touch a little small bits on each of those. Let me first, I'm going to talk about the focus. What I would be doing right now for almost anybody is I think we're at such a unique time in the 9 to 5 world for people being able to switch careers, switch jobs, get work from home, and get a lot higher pay. So in 2022, for the rest of this year, even if you're making a bunch of money, but especially if you're not making where you want to be, my main thing that I'd be doing if I were you guys is going on to Indeed or whatever job site. I don't use LinkedIn. When I change jobs, I just pretty much use Indeed. But I'd be applying to 5 to 10 jobs a day in your market, in your place. Maybe not even in your market, maybe a couple counties over, maybe one state over, to see if you can get work from home. But I've gotten the prevalent amount of DMs I've gotten these past couple months, even in 2021, from readers that they've said I've inspired them in, is getting big pay jumps. I've seen they've ranged from about $20,000 to some have made $75,000 jumps just by asking for the money. Granted, a lot of these people worked in tech, a lot in business. But I've had teachers say that they switched counties and they've made, $17,000 to $20,000 bumps. So my main piece of advice for people going into this year is I would focus on changing, looking for these new careers, looking for these new jobs, and really scaling your income. Because when you one of my biggest problems my first couple years working was, if any of you were at the beginning of this conversation, I mentioned that I was making $35,000 a year. Well, my raises that I was getting, 2 to 5% a year, that only bumped me from 35 to like $46,000 in my first 3 years of working. That was a massive opportunity cost where I could have just, changed jobs, 1 to 2 years in, and gone from maybe $40,000 to $65,000 or $70,000. So it took me a long time to realize that. So I would tell you guys now, apply to 5 to 10 jobs every day, get your resume out there, ask for, don't ask for crazy amounts, but go on Google and see what your value is for your market, for your job, and don't be afraid to ask for that money. If your market says that you're worth $95,000, ask for 105 on the resume. But like I said, when you're shooting 5 to 10 out and you're just going for volume, eventually one of these is going to hit and it's going to work for you. And that's how it worked for me as well. So definitely, search for these new jobs. They're out there. They want to hire you, and there's a lot of money going to that. And then echoing just kind of what Steve and AOP said, the amazing part of this time right now with, work from home, especially if you're in the white collar world, is you now have finally the time where you're not getting beamed down by your managers every day, staring at your computer. You now have, 10 to 30 hours extra a week now where you can be working on one of these side hustles. Even if it's, maybe you're just doing an actual another job, you can even be doing that. But if you can, increase your income on the side, $500,000 a month, get your salary up, 15 to 20 grand leaving. That's where my focus would be on money going forward into 2022. And on the investing side, just echoing what Steve said, if you can just be patient in the market, dump your money into what you know. For me, that's index funds. And for the majority of people, that's going to be index funds. Just dump it, stay patient. Don't get caught up in, what you don't know. And then you'll pretty much be fine if you can just stay the course. I used Steve as one of my examples early in life. I saw what he did. And I pretty much mirrored what he's done. Steve's got probably about an extra 12 years on me, but I've been investing for 7, 8 years now, and I've seen pretty much the results and how well it works. So that's pretty much where I would go kind of going into 2022.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, by the way. This was really, really great, and I would love to have you on more spaces.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. And once again, everybody, make sure that you please are clicking in. These are incredible speakers that we were able to get on here tonight. They are very much worth both your follow, as well as they all have great services. If you click in to Steve's, I know you'll see the link in his bio. There are emails that you can get. There's a lot of free stuff, courses from both AOP and the Wealth Dad, and much more. All right. AOP, any closing remarks, similar stuff to Steve? Any other takeaways for those in the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. The best advice I can give anyone is to always bet on yourself. And what I mean by this is I have a lot of counterintuitive ideas. And some people have been messaging me during this, talking about how much they like some of those different ideas that I've already been talking about. But one of the best pieces of career advice I could give is for you to find a low-key 9 to 5 job that has the least amount of responsibility. Avoid promotions. Find something that is going to pay you well and leave you alone, and use the extra time to start your own side hustle and business. From there, that is the strategy that I actually implemented. So a real quick story, right? I mentioned that I was a public school teacher for 20 years. And when I started this account, I was still working as a teacher, right? And during October of 2020, I was offered $600 to work an extra week. They were having like these intercession weeks, and they came to me and were like, hey, Mr. AOP, can you work for this week? We'll give you $600. And instead, I turned that down and politely declined it. And during that time, I decided to write the course Create 24/7. I wrote the PDF version during that week. And since then, I've made well over 200,000 online. And that is, so I was faced with two chances right there, two paths. I could have taken the $600, say, work for an extra week, trade time for money, or you can start something bigger and better. Always bet on yourself, guys. That's the moral of the story. And if you're interested in learning how to grow an audience on Twitter, get the course created 24/7. Just see the pinned tweet. Just go to my profile, click on my profile picture, and read through the pinned tweet. And I talk about some of the ways, and I give some tips about how to make money online in that thread. Thank you so much for having me, Wolf. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, really great having you. I know we've been chatting about some potential other spaces as well. So we'll be sure to run it back. Really enjoy your content. Have learned a lot from you on building an audience on here. Using Tweet Hunter myself too, and just enjoyed having this. So looking forward to the next one. And last for today's space, but obviously for everyone in the audience, don't feel any need to leave. We're actually going to keep this space open afterwards. I have a whole new slew of guests that are going to come on, and we're just going to kind of use the same space to keep it running. But Steve, bringing it to you for any other closing thoughts or takeaways for the audience or anything else you want to share.
Boy, I guess I would echo what the wealth at AOP have already said. Money is in the creation. It's not in the consuming. So whatever it is that you love doing, whether it's